Hello YouTube, hello Twitch, nous allons aller sur YouTube pour voir des dashcams. Des dashcams, ça plaît pas. Une petite heure avec moi, si vous voulez, vous appréciez le contenu, ben follow. Mettez un follow, suivez-moi pour plus de contenu. Je suis multigaming, tout ça, donc follow moi et puis on verra par la suite quel jeu. Sur ma chaîne, tu vois à peu près ce que je fais, un peu de multigaming, un peu de react sur des dashcams, un peu de react sur des émissions de télé-réalité, tout ça. Donc voilà, je te propose de venir me voir. Et puis, on va lancer directement la dashcam.
We've brought you over 100 episodes featuring over 2,000 dashcam videos. We crunched the numbers and found the videos our viewers enjoyed the most, bringing them together into this mega episode. Buckle up and enjoy the most viewed dashcam videos we've ever published. Mark was driving a tow truck, which was pretty convenient considering what he witnessed. The driver of a pickup made a last-minute high-speed exit before briefly losing control and hitting another vehicle.
Whoa!
Mark stopped to check on the other driver and to see if he could decipher the pickup's license plate number from his dashcam footage. Thankfully, he was able to provide it to the Minnesota State Patrol. Dennis was driving his Honda Civic down a Texas highway with his girlfriend, who was visiting from Canada, in the passenger seat. Suddenly, a semi-truck merged into the side of them, sending the car spinning out of control.
C'est la folie, la folie.
Dennis said it was unfortunate that this happened while his girlfriend was visiting, but he's thankful neither of them were seriously injured. The trucker took responsibility for the collision and said he hadn't seen Dennis's Civic. He asked for a shout out for his girlfriend Jennifer, who flew home as scheduled the day after the collision. Eric sent us this footage from a dashcam in a company semi-truck. Eric told us this truck was being driven by Quincy, who wasn't hurt when an oncoming semi was hit by a hydroplaning SUV, sending it into the temporary median barrier. The impact sent the Jersey barriers sliding into Quincy's lane, where they were struck by a car that had been passing Quincy's Peterbilt. The highway was shut down for cleanup, and Eric told us police responded in under 5 minutes. Nico was driving through Vegas when 3 street racers went flying past him on the highway.
Rocker, baby.
Before they could speed off, one sideswiped another vehicle, pushing it into a concrete barrier and sending sparks flying. Instead of stopping, the racing driver then took off. Once Nico recovered from the shock of what had happened, he called 911 and reported what he'd seen. He told us he saw multiple people stop to help the victim, who was able to safely pull over. Sadly, it seems that the driver responsible sped off into the night and was probably never held to account. Matthias was driving his Honda Accord in Royal Oak, Michigan. There was heavy snow, and traffic was starting to pile up on the highway. A Chrysler was going way too fast, and in an attempt to avoid hitting a Cadillac Escalade, the driver overreacted and hit the truck in front of Matthias instead. Matthias never hit the brakes since he knew it wouldn't help, and instead decided to slowly steer in an evasive maneuver. Once he'd cleared the Chrysler, he hit the gas and steered to the right to gain traction and was able to dodge the Ford Focus.
C'est la route à son papa.
Alright.
C'est la route à son papa, bordel.
We agree with your passengers, Matthias. Nice driving.
Woohoo!
You guys okay?
Yes.
Nelson was driving down a California highway when he encountered a CHP traffic brake, which is when a patrol vehicle drives back and forth slowly across all lanes of a highway to slow down traffic for an incident up ahead. Nelson and most other drivers noticed the sea of red brake lights ahead and came to a stop, but one driver behind Nelson wasn't paying attention and rear-ended another vehicle at highway speed. The vehicle that was initially hit was pushed past Nelson and into several other vehicles. Thankfully, Nelson wasn't involved in the collision. He was late for work, so didn't stay, but he hopes everyone else was okay. This emitter was headed to his brother's house. Another driver turned across 4 lanes of traffic and into the path of our submitter's Jeep, causing $22,000 in damage. The Jeep had to be towed away, but the other vehicle was still drivable. Amazingly, the other driver blamed our submitter for the fact that she pulled in front of him while he was moving at 55 miles per hour. Unsurprisingly, the police found her at fault, and her insurance provider paid for repairs and a rental. Tony was waiting in a left turn lane for his light to turn green so he could make a U-turn. When it did, a pickup driver in the oncoming turn lane ran his red light to go straight. Tony had been watching for anyone who might make a right on red and cut him off, and he hadn't been expecting the pickup truck to go straight for a turn lane, let alone run a red light. The security guard driving the company pickup claimed Tony had been at fault and that he'd had a green light. Even when Tony told him he had a dash cam, he refused to admit to any wrongdoing. When the police arrived, they were all ready to cite Tony for making an improper U-turn, until his wife arrived with a laptop so he could show them his dashcam footage. They then immediately cleared him of any fault and commended him for having a dashcam. His insurance claim is now pending, and he's waiting to see if his Hyundai Santa Fe will be repaired or if it's totaled. Ryan was driving his Nissan Leaf when a young driver ran a red light that had been red for 20 seconds, T-boning Ryan at around 50 miles per hour. The car's safety systems activated, cutting off power from the traction battery. Ryan's wife was knocked unconscious, and a good Samaritan helped them both out of the car. They live only a few blocks from where this happened, so one of the responding police officers gave them a ride home. Ryan then started the insurance process, which went smoothly. In fact, they got such a good deal on the settlement that Ryan actually made a nice profit off his car. He used the money to replace it with his dream car, a Tesla Model S P85D. Now that's an upgrade. By the way, see this liquid on the windshield? Ryan's wife had been trying Vietnamese milk tea for the first time that day, and she really liked the few sips she had, but she hasn't been able to stomach it since. Michael had just gotten coffee from a local convenience store. When he left the parking lot, he ended up behind a Buick Century. While Michael was looking to the left to check for traffic, the Buick driver stopped at a yield sign for no reason. He hit the Buick at about 20 miles per hour, denting the rear bumper cover and taking out his own front bumper cover and headlight. The Buick driver told him at the time that he wasn't injured. Later, the Buick driver claimed he was injured and tried suing Michael for $500,000 in damages. His insurance provider eventually settled with him for $15,000 to avoid further litigation. This submitter was headed home after filling up his tank. As he pulled out onto the road, the passenger of a pickup truck turning the other way flipped him off for no reason. So he returned the favor, admittedly not the best move. A while later, he noticed the same pickup racing up behind him. The driver overtook him before slamming on the brakes, bringing them both to a standstill. Then, the driver got out and started inviting our submitter to fight him. Instead of accepting this invitation, he drove around the deranged man to get away. When he did, the pickup driver slapped his side mirror, shattering the glass, cracking the cover, and chipping the passenger window. Our submitter pulled in front of him and took a quick video of his license plate with his phone. The pickup driver must have realized that he'd committed a crime because he reversed away as our submitter filmed him. Thanks to the dashcam footage, it didn't take long for our submitter to find the guy and take him to court. He never once showed remorse, repeating that this all could have been avoided if only our submitter hadn't flipped him off, as if he then had no choice but to react with violence. Needless to say, this excuse didn't work with the judge. The attacker has to pay our submitter almost $600 to fix his mirror, which is actually less than the total repair bill. I guess our submitter felt generous, even though the other guy doesn't feel bad at all. The driver of a Dodge minivan caused a 5-vehicle collision when they ran a red light and got hit by a Toyota SUV. That impact sent the minivan head-on into a Mini Cooper, which was then shoved backward into Angel's Honda Accord. The 5th vehicle involved was a Chevy pickup that was barely damaged when the Mini Cooper hit it while spinning. The other 4 vehicles were all totaled, and Angel got a check for $24,000 to replace his Accord. The minivan driver was found responsible for all damages. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured. Angel told us he's thankful we are all alive and kicking. He also asked us to please encourage everyone to get a dash cam. Ryan was heading to visit his parents after work one day when the driver of the white Subaru in front of him didn't realize a driver ahead was stopping to wait for oncoming traffic before making a left turn. Without enough time to slow down and stop, the Subaru driver veered into the oncoming lane before colliding with the Ford Escape the other driver had been waiting for in the first place. Ryan called 911 and first responders arrived 3 minutes later. The couple in the Ford Escape were actually his parents' neighbors, and Ryan provided them with a copy of his dashcam footage. He caught up with them a week later, and they told Ryan the footage had been very useful for their insurance claim. Work one day when the driver of the white Subaru in front of him didn't realize a driver ahead was stopping to wait for oncoming traffic before making...
Là, il commence à tourner à gauche. Il tourne à gauche, pas de clignotant. Il est sur une double ligne, mais là je crois que c'est... Je sais pas si... Peut-être interdit de tourner à gauche, ligne droite, hein, ligne continue. Je sais pas. On va
left turn.
Il tourne à gauche sans clignotant. En plus, il déboule comme ça sans regarder en face de lui. Priorité en face. Priorité à lui, quoi. Lui, là, deuxième, priorité. Donc lui, il arrache complètement la priorité au mec. Et sans mettre le clignotant en plus. Et voilà ce que ça a donné, quoi. Paf. Ah, obligé.
Without enough time to slow down and stop, the Subaru driver veered into the oncoming lane before colliding with the Ford Escape the other driver had been waiting for in the first place. Ryan called 911 and first responders arrived 3 minutes later. The couple in the Ford Escape were actually his parents' neighbors, and Ryan provided them with a copy of his dashcam footage. He caught up with them a week later, and they told Ryan the footage had been very useful for their insurance claim. Simon was headed home from work when a Porsche came flying up behind his Audi Q3.
C'est quoi cette dinguerie?
Work one day when the driver of the white Subaru in front of him didn't realize provided them with a copy of his dashcam footage. He caught up with them a week later, and the driver of the Porsche a breathalyzer. The Porsche driver footage had been very came flying up behind his Audi Q3.
Il arrive à une allure assez rapide. Oh là là. Bordel.
The Porsche driver tried to blame the sun for blinding her, but that doesn't explain why she was driving so fast. Simon has moderate whiplash, and both vehicles were totaled. A few minutes after the crash, her mother and friends showed up with a tow truck and tried to quickly get Simon's info so they could leave. Simon knew something wasn't right, so he made them wait for the police, and they were not happy. When the cops arrived, they gave the driver of the Porsche a breathalyzer test. We don't know what the results were, but we do know that she was immediately arrested. Simon wanted to shout out everyone who stopped to help, especially an off-duty cop who kept him from having a panic attack. He also said he's thinking about replacing his Audi with a Tesla. Dan is a streetcar operator in the Czech Republic. He was making one last route to help out after a big accident, but he forgot to check the position of the track while entering an intersection.
C'est quoi cette dinguerie?
He's thinking about replacing his after a big accident, but he forgot to check the position of the track while entering an intersection.
Lui aussi c'est un tram. C'est une voiture. Je comprends pas. Est-ce que c'est un cam ou une voiture, lui?
Luckily, nobody was hurt. Dan admits this accident was entirely his own fault, and he was sure he'd get fired. Instead, he was allowed to keep his job as long as he paid for the damage. It cost him about $3,000 US. Fortunately, his insurance provider covered most of the repair costs. He wanted us to remind everyone that streetcars take a long time to stop. Even going only 30 miles per hour, it takes about 250 feet for a streetcar to come to a complete stop. A pickup driver failed to secure his U-Haul trailer, and it came off the hitch while he was driving down the highway.
Oh là, oh là 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 là, le truc derrière il est pas bien stable, hein. Il est parti en papillon, quoi, en portefeuille. Oh là là.
Eventually, the safety chains failed, and the trailer was sent rolling into the median barrier before flipping over. Thankfully, the trailer was completely empty. Juanito was driving in Chicago when the driver of a black GMC SUV pulled into his lane. He flashed his high beams at her, but she didn't budge, so he just went around her.
Là, il est vert. Oula, lui là là là. Oh. C'est rouge là. Après, il était engagé quand c'était vert, donc du coup, moi je l'aurais laissé passer. Parce
Evidently,
que
this outraged the GMC driver, who proceeded to follow Juanito, prompting him to turn onto a side street to avoid a confrontation.
Et puis voilà quoi. Tu laisses passer derrière.
The GMC driver followed Juanito anyway by reversing and turning down the same street, then cut off and brake checked him.
Putain, il double comme ça lui. Qu'est-ce qu'il fait en plus? Il zigzague. Oh! Quoi? En plus, il est
When he finally got around her before a traffic light, she drove up onto the sidewalk to get next to him.
Typique conduite. What?
She proceeded to flip him off and yell at him, which he couldn't understand through his windows, while another young woman in the back seat waved a baseball bat at him. She then tossed a drink out of the window before driving off. Juanito ended up following her inadvertently since he was headed the same way, and she brake checked him one more time before he swerved around her and drove away.
Tête à queue, je veux dire. Je me trompe, désolé.
He drove to a nearby police station and waited a few minutes in the parking lot before heading home, just in case. KN was driving his Nissan Leaf on his way to work one morning. As he approached a green light, he noticed another car not moving and assumed the driver wasn't paying attention. It turned out the other driver had stopped for another reason one KN couldn't see or hear until it was too late. A San Francisco police car T-boned KN's car and pushed it into a light pole, totaling both vehicles. Later investigation revealed the cop car hit the Leaf's driver's door at 32 miles per hour. The cop car spun around and struck the Nissan in the back as well, shoving it hard into the light pole. A witness later said the cop car had accelerated before the impact, and both vehicles' airbags deployed. The official police report stated that the officer driving had slowed down for the intersection, and since KN didn't have comprehensive insurance coverage, he got nothing in the way of compensation after being found at fault. KN's Nissan was completely destroyed, and he was briefly hospitalized before making a full recovery. Fortunately, he was able to replace his car with another of the same year. Eli was taking a friend to get his wisdom teeth removed when they watched a pickup slam into the fender of an oncoming SUV, sending it over an embankment and into an irrigation canal. The pickup spun around and stopped just short of hitting a power pole while the SUV plunged into the water. Eli helped the SUV driver climb out of one of the rear doors as the SUV sank into the water. In the meantime, his friend helped the occupants of the pickup, an adult and two children. First responders arrived quickly and provided aid to everyone involved in the collision. In spite of all that, Eli's friend was still able to get his wisdom teeth removed. Raph was driving his Toyota Camry through New York City on a street with a speed limit of 25 miles per hour. He was proceeding through a green light, giving plenty of room for a double-parked vehicle and traffic in the left turn lane, when a car coming the other way swerved around traffic, slamming into Raph before he could react. His dashcam lost power when the impact occurred, so the video stops at this point. The vehicle that hit him was stolen, and it slammed into him at 55 miles per hour. Both vehicles were obliterated. Occupants of the pickup, his Toyota Camry, through New York City on a street with a speed limit of 25 miles per hour. He was proceeding through a green light, giving plenty of room for a double-parked vehicle and traffic in the left turn lane, when a car coming the other way swerved around traffic, slamming into Raph before he could react.
Là, il y a la voiture. Vous voyez la voiture là? La voiture grise. Elle est en train de boucher la route déjà. Donc lui, il se doit pas. Mais moi, je devrais m'arrêter ou passer. Là, j'essaye de déporter un peu vers la gauche parce que je peux en vrai. C'est pas trop sans que la perte. Mais malheureusement, il y a un mec qui arrive juste en face là et qui déboule comme un fou avec aucun clignotant, rien. Il part de toute la droite là-bas et traverse toute la route pour atterrir sur ma voie. Moi je déporte un peu, normal. Tous les conducteurs font ça presque. Quand il y a un mec qui est en warning, c'est lui. Déjà en bas, à la base, lui il est en erreur. Il est devant un feu, près d'un feu rouge, à l'arrêt. Ça c'est pas possible. Il est déjà en erreur lui. Tout ça, ça démarre à cause de cette voiture-là. Moi je passe dans mon droit en gros parce que lui il est là, mais c'est lui qui est en faute de départ. Je passe, je veux doubler, parce qu'en voyant que je mets personne en danger, bon, c'est faisable. Mais lui qui arrive à fond de patate sur ma ligne, là, c'est pas possible. Là, il y a un vrai problème. Je sais pas pourquoi il arrive comme ça à cette vitesse déjà en démarrage de feu vert. Et bam!
His dashcam lost power when the impact occurred, so the video stops at this point. The vehicle that hit him was stolen and it slammed into him at 55 miles per hour. Both vehicles were obliterated and Raph was hospitalized with a broken femur. 8 hours later, he had surgery to insert a
Attendez, j'arrive.
metal rod into his bone held in place by 4 screws. Here's what Raph's car looked like before the accident. Now he has no car and hasn't been able to work for months. He's hired an attorney and they're currently trying to get access to footage from multiple NYPD cameras that captured the accident. We'll update you in a future episode if they're successful. Peyton was on his way home when he watched a Dodge pickup truck hydroplane and lose control. The truck spun and collided with the median barrier before coming to rest in Peyton's lane, where he had no chance to stop even after slamming on his brakes. The accident did $53,000 in damage to Peyton's 2-month-old truck and the trailer he'd been pulling. At first, the other driver's insurance provider refused to pay for the damage, but after he sent them the dashcam footage, the process went a lot more smoothly. Jordan was driving his BMW 340i in New Jersey when he noticed a dark-colored Acura driving erratically. Check out what happened after Jordan had been following the Acura for a while.
There was just an accident! Bro! Holy I just witnessed a accident! Holy
Okay.
Holy
Accident did $53,000 in damage to Peyton's 2-month-old truck and the trailer he'd been pulling. At first, the other driver's insurance provider refused to pay for the damage, but after he sent them the dashcam footage, the process went a lot more smoothly. Jordan was driving his BMW 340i in New Jersey when he noticed a dark-colored Acura driving erratically. Check out what happened after Jordan had been following the Acura for a while.
There was just an accident! Bro! Holy I just witnessed a accident! Holy
Heard it.
Bro!
I heard it.
Bro! Yo!
I heard it.
Nah, let me get out.
After the Acura drifted across a lane line and struck another vehicle, it crashed into the center divider before ricocheting across the highway and into the guardrail. Jordan stopped and checked on the driver, who asked him who hit who. This leads Jordan to believe he'd either fallen asleep at the wheel or he was driving under the influence. Fortunately, the drivers of both vehicles were okay. Jordan
Quand tu fais comme lui là, qui a perdu le contrôle de son véhicule, il a foncé à l'arrière, tout ça, tout est ta faute. La voiture qui est en faute, c'est lui. Il n'y a pas de 50-50, rien du tout. C'est directement le mec fautif, c'est lui. Tu dois avoir le contrôle de ton véhicule.
Sent his dashcam footage to the driver of the white Corolla. Katie was a mile from home after driving for 3 hours. When she entered the turn lane at an intersection, she was shocked to be nose to nose with a Nissan coming the wrong way.
Ligne continue.
She'd been traveling at about 35 miles per hour and had to slam on the brakes to avoid an accident. She could tell that the driver was embarrassed by the mistake. Later, when she watched the dashcam footage, she noticed the Nissan can be seen driving through the intersection, turning early and ending up on the wrong side of the island.
Ah ouais, joli quoi. Sens interdit. La voie est juste à
found out
droite.
what happens when a speeding convertible loses control on the
Ils sont pas
highway.
concentrés sur la route. Bordel. Avec cette vitesse. Qu'est-ce qu'il va faire? Oh là, wow! Mais ouais, mais putain, il est vraiment con lui, il arrive à je sais pas combien, son véhicule il est pas stable.
At over 90 miles per hour, the convertible lost traction before slamming into the back of a box truck. Both vehicles pulled over, but Advait doesn't know what else happened as he wasn't able to stop. Ethan was headed home from school in his 2006 Mercedes-Benz E500 and had just entered the passing lane to go around a BMW when the Nissan Sentra in front of him rear-ended a
Faut avoir
truck.
la sécurité entre les véhicules. Ça arrive. Ça peut faire carambolage, ces genres de trucs.
Ethan
toujours mettre
slammed
une
on his
distance de
brakes, but it
sécurité
wasn't
entre les
enough.
véhicules de
He
devant et de derrière.
rear-ended the Sentra,
Et
turning
chaque
this into a
véhicule de la route,
three-car
surtout quand c'est des
accident.
routes
He
serrées
was
comme
slapped
ça,
with a $250
et que t'as pas
US
beaucoup de
fine, and his
solutions si
liability
jamais
only
ça-
insurance
De toute
didn't
façon,
cover any
c'est-
repairs to his car after
au
he was found
permis-
to be at fault for the accident. He spent a month
Au permis, c'est simple. Tu fais ça, c'est fini. Tu l'as pas ton permis. Il faut obligatoirement, quand il y a une situation comme ça, avec des voitures et que c'est serré, qu'il y a beaucoup de monde, tu es obligé d'avoir une distance de sécurité limitée. Parce que quand ça dépend les trucs, ça peut être un trait, deux traits. Normalement, dans une situation comme celle-ci, ça a 50 ou 60, non peut-être 80 sur une route à deux. Ouais, ça peut être 80, 90, 80 chez nous. Bon, tu mets bon, deux bonnes lignes, là, deux bonnes grandes lignes sur le côté à droite là. Deux grandes lignes et puis c'est bien. Et au moins tu es à l'aise. Si ça freine d'un coup sec, il y a un carambolage devant, tu peux faire quelque chose, mais des fois c'est peut-être
Rebuilding
même pas. C'est pas obligatoirement sûr que tu t'en sors quoi. Donc voilà.
car himself in his driveway using parts from another Mercedes with a blown engine. It still needs paint, but I'd say that's not bad for an 18-year-old fixing his first car. This submitter was headed home with his wife in the car when he suddenly noticed an oncoming vehicle making straight for them.
Oh là! Et pourquoi il
He
a...
managed to turn enough to avoid a head-on collision, but the car still smashed into them.
comprends pas pourquoi
What
il
really
part, il arrive
sucks
de
is
là,
that
il
this
arrive
happened
comme
only
ça.
150 feet away from the submitter's house. Missed it by that much. The submitter initially paid about $5,500 US dollars to get his car fixed, which took 3 months. After 6 months, the other driver's insurance provider finally paid the submitter for 60% of the repairs. They told him he'd have to get the other 40% from the driver of the red car that had cut the other driver off. After 3 more months, he finally got the rest of the repairs paid for by his own insurance provider. In the accident, one of the submitter's tires was destroyed, and insurance would only pay to replace one, even though tires should always be replaced in pairs. The submitter paid for the second tire out of his own pocket. A white Volkswagen pulled out of a gas station and crossed multiple lanes of traffic in front of Jet. Everything seemed fine until a wild semi-truck appeared.
Wow. Ah, c'est
Jet
pas bien.
stopped and helped direct traffic while the
Ah,
drivers...
franchement, là c'est méchant ça. Il est pas prioritaire. Ils sont à l'arrêt et c'est le feu rouge. Bon, tout le monde le laisse passer les véhicules là sur 3-4 lignes. Il le laisse passer et le poids lourd, ce salopard, il le voit. Il le voit qu'il est à l'arrêt lui aussi, c'est pareil je crois. Normalement il est au feu rouge, il peut pas passer. Et il le laisse pas passer, il lui détruit sa voiture. En sachant que lui il est en tort en vrai. Parce qu'il l'a pas passé. Quoi que les gens l'ont laissé passer, je sais pas comment ça se passe quand c'est comme ça. Quand tout le monde vous laisse passer, le truc c'est quand les gens ils vous laissent passer, il faut bien analyser sur toutes les rues à côté de ces voitures ou cette voiture qui vous laisse passer. Il faut bien voir si vous avez la possibilité de passer aussi. Si c'est vraiment mort, vous passez pas. C'est mieux. Parce que vous êtes en tort s'il arrive quelque chose. Comme lui, là, à l'heure actuelle, il est en tort.
Involved pulled over to exchange information.
C'est un peu,
He asked for a shout out for his friends Danny and Anthony and his little sister Linda.
Sur la route, il faut un peu de courtoisie, mais lui, là, le poids lourd, il l'a complètement... La courtoisie, il l'a pas du tout. Hein. Il fait le chien, quoi, complètement. Mais bon, lui, s'il aurait été vraiment dans le permis et qu'il n'aurait pas été en mode, ouais, il y a de la courtoisie sur la route et tout, il n'aurait pas dû s'avancer. En sachant que c'est feu rouge et que là, les routes... Il attend au feu, les voitures y passent, il passe derrière. Après, tu es obligé de temps en temps un peu forcer. Parce que sinon, tu passes jamais. Mais là, aux États-Unis avec 4 lignes et tout, je pense que normalement, les gens auraient pu se déporter à un moment et lui passer à droite. Ah, lui, il devait aller sur la 4e voie. Au pire des cas, il tourne à droite et retourne à droite. Là, il fait faire demi-tour ou tout droit, faire demi-tour, rentrer dans une. Il y a un moyen, mais ça à éviter sur 4 lignes. Parce que sur les 4 lignes, faut que tu calcules. Faut que tu calcules sur les 4 lignes si tu vas pouvoir passer. Mais c'est compliqué, il y a 4 lignes, faut réfléchir, c'est rapide, faut réfléchir vite.
Dashcam and Wham Bam Tesla Cam. Hey everybody, we hope you're satisfied.
La voiture blanche est en tort.
Jaden was headed to a Toyota dealership when his Hyundai Sonata was rear-ended by an SUV, spinning at 90 degrees and ripping off half of the rear bumper cover and a taillight.
Lui se fait tamponner par l'arrière.
Jaden asked the dealership for their security footage of the accident, which gives us a much better angle of what happened.
Il se fait tamper l'arrière. Putain, il aurait pu aller à gauche, il aurait pu tourner à gauche. En regardant
The
ça de
SUV
sa
driver
vitesse.
started driving away at first, but stopped a few
Non, mais
blocks
s'en
down the
fout
road due to
complètement, quoi.
deployed airbags. The car was totaled and had to be taken away on a flatbed truck. Jaden and his passengers were transported to the hospital as a precaution, but they were uninjured.
En
The other
France,
drivers
tu fonces derrière un véhicule, t'es en tort dans tous les cas. Peu importe ce qu'il y a, t'es en tort. Si une voiture elle est sur la route et toi tu fonces dans son derrière, tu n'es pas maître de ton véhicule. Du coup t'es en tort, direct. Ils cherchent pas à comprendre l'assurance. S'il n'y a pas de nanani nanana, tu fonces derrière, c'est que t'as pas contrôlé ton véhicule et t'es en tort. C'est tout, point barre.
insurance provider paid Jaden $23,000 US for the vehicle and hospital bill, and he replaced his Hyundai with a Mercedes SLK 350 Sport Convertible. Upgrade! John is a snowplow operator who was working during a winter storm one afternoon. The driver of a Mercury Grand Marquis was driving too fast and spun across the center line and into the path of a pickup truck.
Pouah.
The pickup truck hit the Grand Marquis, sending it spinning
Bah, lui
back
fait un
across the
aquaplaning,
road.
hein.
Another
En fait,
vehicle then hit the pickup when the driver was
lui qui fonce en face là, qui vient de nous arriver en face. En fait, il neige, donc c'est simple. Ses pneus ils se sont remplis de. Il roule assez trop vite déjà, parce que quand il neige, il faut rouler super doucement parce que ça glisse de partout. Surtout si t'as pas les pneus adaptés, pas de chaîne, ceci. Il y a plein de paramètres à prendre en compte. Et en plus, si tu as les pneus lisses et que tu commences à rouler un peu vite, dès que tes pneus, les rainures, les aquaplaning, c'est les rainures qui se remplissent d'eau. Et en fait, c'est comme si tu étais sur un tapis d'eau. Et tu peux plus rien faire. Hein. Une fois que tu es sur un tapis d'eau, c'est terminado quoi. Tu te fais boys. Et voilà
was
comment ça
unable
finit.
to avoid a collision.
Aquaplaning.
Finally, a Honda
Contrôle
driver,
plus
eager
véhicule.
to avoid a Honda bump,
Défoutu.
went up onto the curb rather than rear-end the other vehicle.
Complètement
John
tort.
stopped and shared his dashcam
Il a fait un
video with the
aquaplaning, il est en
involved
train de le
drivers
faire, il
and
arrive plus à
responding
contrôler son
police.
véhicule.
Police told John the
Il a
Grand Marquis driver was
juste à freiner,
confused
et
and
même
didn't
en
even know what
freinant,
direction he'd been going.
Lui qui arrive
Firefighters
dans les
apparently
rainures,
had a
c'est un
hard
tapis
time
d'eau, donc tu
extracting
freines
him
sur
from
le
the
tapis d'eau, y a
vehicle.
rien du tout qui se-
Melissa was driving to work when her Subaru Crosstrek was rear-ended by the driver of an Infiniti who wasn't paying attention.
On lui tape derrière.
Melissa's car immediately began notifying
Ça arrive
emergency
souvent, ça.
services.
Ça, c'est un
She then
manque.
called her fiancé Matt, and he was actually watching a helicopter
J'attends.
shot of the accident scene
Regardez.
when she called him. Melissa attached the dashcam footage to her insurance claim, and the insurance company paid for her totaled Subaru as well as her medical bills. Losing the Subaru she'd just gotten was upsetting, but Matt was able to find her a replacement and is just glad her injuries weren't any more serious.
Vous voyez cette axe juste avant là, quand la voiture elle est à l'arrêt, la voiture elle se fait foncer derrière le dos. Ça c'est une voiture qui n'a pas pris les distances de sécurité. Du coup elle est arrivée sûrement un peu trop vite, elle a freiné, mais elle n'a pas eu le temps. Parce qu'en fait elle était tellement proche de l'autre qu'elle n'a pas eu le temps de freiner. Tandis que si elle aurait appliqué les distances de sécurité comme on a en France, c'est pareil aux États-Unis, on conduit tous à peu près pareil. Hein, la voiture c'est simple, c'est international. C'est pareil, dans la logique, si tu conduis près d'une voiture et que tu as à 50 km/h, on est tous l'un à côté derrière l'autre. À un moment, s'il y a un mec qui freine devant, tout le monde freine d'un seul coup, c'est obligatoirement, ça va faire un carambolage. C'est pour ça qu'il y a les distances de sécurité. Normalement, tu mets de 1 trait à 2 traits. Normalement, quand c'est 50 km/h, tu mets 2 traits, c'est bien. Et puis voilà, ça n'arriverait pas.
Herb was driving in Las Vegas when he watched another driver run a red light. That's not what this
Red
clip
light.
is about,
Feu
though.
rouge.
While Herb was waiting for the light to turn green, as one does when at a red light, an oncoming driver ignored the
rouge,
red light and drove
clignotant pour tourner à
straight
gauche.
through it,
Je le
getting
vois dans le panneau
T-boned in the
d'annonce.
process.
Clignote dans le panneau, ouais. Oh là là, il passe au rouge ou quoi?
The vehicle kept rolling after the impact, slamming into Herb's Nissan Frontier. The Chevy was a rental and the driver was drunk. When the police came, he didn't remember running the red light and told them that he'd been run into twice. The airbags in Herb's truck had deployed and all three vehicles had to be towed. Fortunately, there were no major injuries. Herb asked us to shout out his wife Jessica and her friend Jennifer. They both love the Wham Bam channels and can't wait to upgrade to Teslas someday.
Alcool au volant, franchement évitez les gens. Évitez, ça va vous causer des problèmes, tu peux tuer quelqu'un sous alcool, vraiment c'est très dangereux de boire au volant. Tu peux boire un petit verre au volant, tu vois, mais après c'est tout, tu bois un verre, c'est tout, pas plus. Si tu veux boire au volant, tu prends quelqu'un qui conduit mais qui ne boit pas. Et il y en a en soirée, ils boivent pas. Ça peut être un de tes amis qui boit pas, tu lui donnes le véhicule, même si ton véhicule t'as pas envie de le prêter, Ou sinon, tu prends un Uber et si vous voulez tous boire, tu prends un Uber et puis voilà, vous payez, vous mettez à la masse ou je sais pas. Mais tu bois pas au volant, c'est dingue. Si t'es alcoolisé, que t'es vraiment pas apte, tu bois une bouteille de 70 juste avant de conduire ou tu bois deux trois bouteilles dans la soirée, tu vas pas être apte. Du coup, prends un chauffeur Uber. C'est pas trop cher, tu mets à la masse, même si c'est 50 balles, ça va te coûter le prix d'une bouteille, mais bon, après tu t'en as déjà bu deux ou trois. Si tu sors, t'as un peu d'argent. Vous cotisez un peu et vous prenez un Uber, c'est mieux. Boire au volant, j'ai bu au volant quand j'ai fait une fiété. J'ai pas bu beaucoup, j'ai bu au volant une fois, il y a longtemps maintenant. Ça fait 15 ans, 20 ans que j'ai le permis. J'ai bu au volant, je me suis retrouvé en soirée, en boîte de nuit, tac. Je bois au volant, je passais mon conducteur, j'allais en formation de chauffeur de bus. La mauvaise chose, quoi, vraiment con. C'est vraiment bête de ce que j'ai fait. Quand tu réfléchis, c'est vraiment pas le truc à faire. Le lundi, je commence ma formation. Le samedi, je pars en soirée. Je fais la petite fête. Mais à partir de 3 heures, je bois plus. Je sors à 8 heures de la soirée. Je pars de boîte de nuit, de discothèque. C'était en Belgique, on était sortis. Il y a des grosses boîtes à l'époque. Il y avait des grosses boîtes. Même encore maintenant, je pense. Il y avait une grosse boîte. On allait, bam, on sort. Je sors, je mange. On reste devant le parking de 6 à 8 heures. On parle, on discute. Ça tic. On discute entre nous avec des filles, tout ça. On mange en même temps. Bam, moi, je me sens super apte. Je prends la voiture et moi, je me dis, c'est bon, c'est cool. Je me fais attraper, on me contrôle, bam, directement, je suis au-dessus de la moyenne. Je suis à 0,58 par gramme dans l'air soufflé. Je suis à peine je suis au-dessus du contractuel, je suis dans le délit. Du coup, directement, c'est suppression de permis 6 mois. Et du coup, j'ai perdu mon permis 6 mois, et alors que j'avais à 0, j'étais à 0,56 au lieu de 0,50 contraventionnel. J'étais dans le délictuel du coup, et du coup j'ai perdu mon permis, j'ai perdu ma formation, et j'ai perdu du temps. J'aurais pu avoir ma formation de chauffeur de bus que j'attendais depuis 4 mois, et j'ai fait vraiment le con, quoi. Et à partir de là, je me suis dit, je ne buvrai plus jamais au volant. Si un jour je bois au volant, je suis dans ma voiture, je prends ma voiture, je dors dedans, je me réveille le lendemain, je prends la route. Mais après, si je suis trop d'arraché et que j'ai envie de rentrer, je prends un Uber ou un taxi, quoi. Tu te cotises, t'as un peu d'argent, quand tu sors t'as de l'argent, ne bois pas au volant, c'est tout, c'est simple, tu bois pas au volant. Ou si t'as bu au volant, tu bois un verre, mais un verre concret, hein, pas j'ai bu un verre et tu te dis ouais j'ai bu un verre alors que t'en as bu 4. Tu bois un verre si tu veux, mais pas plus. Et tu bois un verre dans ta soirée, tu fais pas de calcul, ouais là ça fait 6 heures que j'ai pas bu, je bois un deuxième. Tu bois un verre, c'est tout, point barre. Et tu fais pas plus, parce que c'est très dangereux. L'alcool au volant, ça pardonne pas.
Jeffrey watched a red Mustang sideswipe a white Nissan Leaf, starting a chain reaction that would ultimately involve Jeffrey's Ram 2500 as well.
Voilà, ça c'est... Il a pris la perte totale de son véhicule.
Jeffrey told us that every southbound lane of the highway was shut down by first responders until the wreckage could be cleaned up. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured in the collision. Kyla was driving her Pontiac Vibe when the driver of a GMC Yukon failed to yield to her at an intersection where he had a stop sign, but she didn't. When the Yukon began crossing the road in front of her, Kyla had no opportunity to stop before slamming into it. Thankfully, firefighters arrived only 4 minutes later to provide aid. What was the Yukon driver's excuse for causing the collision that totaled Kyla's Pontiac? He told the police he didn't see her car approaching, in spite of the clear line of sight he had long before he started across the road. Kyla wanted to take this opportunity to remind our viewers that you shouldn't sit too closely to the steering wheel, as this can cause injury in the event of a collision by preventing proper deployment of the airbag. Ram was heading into a hospital parking lot when he had an encounter with a very pleasant pickup driver. Ram started turning into an open parking spot when the pickup driver suddenly floored the accelerator in reverse, blocking him from parking. The pickup driver screamed at Ram through his open window, apparently upset because he thought Ram was going to steal his parking spot. He then backed up the rest of the way, nicely overlapping into the spot Ram had actually been planning to use. Clearly, this guy is such a highly skilled driver, the parking lines just don't...
Des gens qui sont énervés pour rien à leur volant, là. Quand vous êtes tranquille dans votre voiture, essayez d'éviter tout accrochage, toute dispute. Une dispute comme ça, c'est une dispute à la con, ça peut tourner très très mal alors qu'il n'y a pas le. Des fois, ça peut vous amener dans un truc, ça peut chevaucher en violence. Vous imaginez même pas la violence. Ça peut prendre d'une petite insulte à la con, vous pouvez passer dessus et ça va vous coûter. Vous allez rentrer chez vous tranquille. Tandis que si vous commencez à vouloir. Il n'y a rien à prouver. Si vous savez ce que vous valez, vous n'avez pas à prouver à ce mec-là que vous êtes plus fort que lui sur une histoire de véhicule. Il a fait ça, vous prenez, il y a des places à côté, soit vous garez à côté, vous sortez. Si le mec il vous agresse vraiment avec quelque chose, il vient vous taper dessus, là vous agissez. Si le mec il a que de la bouche, vous le laissez tranquille. Vous partez, vous faites ce que vous avez à faire, vous allez rentrer chez vous et rien ne va vous arriver. Tandis que là, si vous escaladez la violence, ça peut finir en commissariat, en prison, tout ce que vous voulez. Et là, c'est pas le bon truc.
Don't apply to his compensate mobile.
Moi, la bonne chose à faire, quand j'ai des histoires au volant, j'évite. À part si le mec il vient et m'attaque. C'est le seul truc que je pourrais pas me laisser. Malheureusement, je pourrais pas laisser. S'il me touche, il veut me taper avec quelque chose, je serai obligé de me défendre.
Ram possesses a modicum of emotional stability, unlike the other guy. He gladly parked in a different spot and ignored the third-grade insults that had been hurled in his direction.
Il même pas énervé, lui.
David was leaving a UPS store in Long Beach and needed to make a U-turn in the road's center turn lane. A vehicle he hadn't seen before came speeding up the lane behind him, slamming on the brakes and skidding to a stop. David's
Vous le connaissez ni d'Adam ni d'Ève et vous vous embrouillez avec, quoi. C'est comme ça, tu vois.
Swerved right to give the other vehicle room to stop without hitting him, missing his opportunity to turn in the process. The other driver, now enraged, passed David in the oncoming lane, then brake checked him. With nowhere to go, David was forced to rear-end the other vehicle. The other driver then got out and began acting as though this was David's fault. Eventually, the other driver admitted to brake-checking David and causing the accident, but only after claiming that David had cut him off. Insurance is currently handling the claim, and David's front bumper cover will need to be replaced. Fortunately, nobody was injured. Oddly enough, it seems like the accident actually helped fix the other guy's car. Neither of his brake lights worked when he brake-checked David.
Là, le conducteur ne regarde pas. Sinon tu freines. Il avait le temps. Là, il a le temps. Il est pas 150 km/h. Là, il avait le temps. La distance de sécurité, elle avait l'air d'être assez bonne. C'était un peu proche, mais bon, il y a moyen de freiner quand même. Des fois, il y en a qui sont collés, ils arrivent à freiner. Si tu as des bons freins. Si tu as des freins vraiment qui sont en fin de vie, là, tu fais pas ça, quoi. Mais si tu as des bons freins, normalement tu as des bons freins, tu sors pas avec des freins qui freinent pas, quoi. C'est le truc le plus important. Je pense que lui il était en tort, il arrivait, il a pas regardé, il était occupé sur le tel ou je sais pas avec son chien peut-être qui faisait n'importe quoi. Lui a foncé à l'arrière, il est en tort. Point barre.
But after the collision, one of them started
Quand
working
tu
again.
Derrière, tu dois émettre de ton véhicule.
A man waited patiently for his traffic light to turn green before proceeding through the intersection.
Lui il passe au feu vert. Paf, il se fait taper dedans.
Wait, what happened? Let's take a look at the rear camera and see if we can tell why E-Man's Hyundai Kona suddenly spun out of control. A Nissan Leaf driver had run a red light, T-boning E-Man's SUV hard enough to push it into the pickup truck on his right. It's not until E-Man pulls out of the intersection that we can spot the red light runner's vehicle. A patrolling police officer came across the accident scene before anybody called 911, and E-Man gave them a copy of it.
Il n'y a aucun débat possible, on sait tous que c'est le mec qui a cramé le feu rouge.
Was seriously injured. Nick was driving about 30 miles per hour in a 40-mile-per-hour zone and catching up to another vehicle going about 20 miles per hour. Since the lane lines indicated passing was allowed, Nick decided to pass the vehicle. Just as he made his move, the driver of the pickup truck put on their turn signal and immediately began turning left.
Wow!
Nick stood on the brake pedal, but the pickup driver had practically stopped to make their turn, and there was no way he could on the brake left.
Vous voyez, il met pas son clignotant. Il doit tourner à gauche, mais il met pas son clignotant. Ça fait que moi, qu'en pensant qu'il reste dans la ligne, mais qu'il est lente, je vais doubler, mais un peu...
Nick stood on the brake pedal, but the pickup driver had practically stopped to make their turn, and there was no way he could avoid hitting them. Luckily, nobody was injured. At first, the other driver's insurance provider found Nick to be 100% at fault.
voyez, il y a une ligne continue, mais là, sur notre ligne à nous, ça, la ligne continue, c'est pour ceux de gauche. Et nous, on a une ligne dépareillée. Donc, on a le droit de tourner à gauche, parce qu'on arrive sur la voie. Et je crois qu'on n'a pas le droit de doubler, en fait. On est en tort, le conducteur est en tort.
But their version of events kept changing, and each time their account was disproved by the dashcam footage. At one point, they said Nick had attempted passing over double yellow lines. After this was refuted, they said their customer had used their turn signal early, but that's not true either. Both Nick and his own insurance provider are still fighting over who's at fault. What do you think? Let us know in the comments.
Réfléchissez parce que c'est un peu plus complexe.
Watch what Tony witnessed while taking his family to his parents' house.
Vous pouvez tourner à gauche, mais il y avait la ligne continue pour tout droit. Donc du coup, il y avait, pour se retourner à gauche, c'est ok, mais pour faire un dépassage, non, c'est pas ok. Voilà. Bon là, il y a
A flatbed hauling a boat took a corner too fast, swinging the boat into a vehicle and onto the pavement. Tony pulled over to block traffic and check on the victim. She was fine, but the driver of a second flatbed that
là, un truc comme ça, c'est la société de camions qui est en tort. Directement. Le mec qui a sanglé, là, il a fait n'importe comment. Il a pas bien sanglé, ça. Surtout s'il part avec un bateau comme ça en pleine ville, il doit sangler. Je sais pas si c'est convoi exceptionnel, si ça dépasse ou pas, je pense pas, mais en tout cas, il doit sangler. À moins qu'il remorque parce qu'il est en panne.
that had been following the first kept yelling at Tony to go away, even though he was staying well clear of the accident. The woman was fine, but the same can't be said for the boat. The flatbed driver dragged it half a block and into a parking lot before getting it back on the truck. Lewis was being followed closely by the driver of a black Honda. As he rounded a curve, the Honda driver took the opportunity to speed around Lewis before losing control. The Honda driver went too fast into the curve and slid into a parked SUV. Lewis stopped to check on the occupants, and neither of them were seriously injured. Lewis called 911, but he told us the police never responded. Instead, 2 tow trucks arrived to take both vehicles away. Evidently, the owner of the SUV wasn't home at the time, but Lewis sent a copy of his dashcam footage to one of their neighbors. Imagine coming home and finding that. Check out what happened to Tim as he was headed to school.
Bah! Priorité à droite ou stop?
He was driving his BMW about 45 miles per hour when another driver failed to
Céder le passage?
yield and pulled out in front of him.
Céder le passage. Poitiers comme ça, céder le passage. Bon, céder le passage, il est en tort, hein, celui-là qui passe en face. Hein. C'est pas le conducteur.
He was
Ouais, céder le passage.
able to get out of his car on his own and disconnect the battery, but bystanders made sure he was rushed to the hospital. He had extensive internal injuries, and he spent a week and a half in the hospital and another 3 months in physical therapy, plus a month of psychotherapy. He received $8,600 for his totaled car and his pain and suffering. He's working on trying to get the car roadworthy again, but in the meantime, he's driving this BMW E39 540i, his dream car. Be careful out there, Tim. We're glad you're okay. This week's first video comes to us from Scranton, Pennsylvania. A Honda driver pulled out in front of our submitter's Audi A4. Even though he honked and swerved, he wasn't able to avoid a collision. Police responded, and
Bon, on passe au vert. Hein. Le feu,
so did the owner of the Honda.
Le feu il est vert et lui il doit tourner à gauche. Donc normalement, laisse la priorité. Quand tu passes à travers quelque chose pour aller à ton endroit, c'est que tu n'es pas en priorité. Lui à rouge, là, il n'est pas prioritaire. Il ne doit pas traverser 2-3 lignes de voitures qui passent. Donc obligatoirement, il doit s'arrêter.
Who turned out to be the daughter of the...
Il tâte, il se dit ouais, là, il me laisse ou il me laisse pas passer. Mais à la base, il n'aurait même pas dû s'engager lui en rouge.
The elderly woman who'd been driving...
En plus, lui, il veut tourner à... Ah, lui, il veut l'éviter. Il aurait dû continuer tout droit. Lui, il continue tout droit, s'il s'arrête pas, il roule doucement, il ralentit, il roule tout droit, s'il s'arrête pas, il va le foncer dessus.
She gave her mom a piece of her mind while the cops gave our submitter a ride home. Kyle was driving his 2017 Audi A4 at about 30 miles per hour. As he approached an intersection, his view was obstructed by traffic in the left turn lane, and he assumed those drivers were yielding for oncoming traffic.
Bah!
Actually, traffic had stopped for an ambulance with lights and siren active. Kyle didn't see it until he'd already entered the intersection.
Ça là, ils sont prioritaires, sûr et certain. Le seul problème, c'est que le mec, s'ils ont mis les sirènes et qu'ils n'ont pas mis le bruit, je sais pas comment ça se passe, mais je sais quand ils allument les sirènes, normalement ils doivent mettre. Si c'est vraiment une urgence, ils doivent mettre le bruit. Vu le monde qu'il y a là, tu peux être dans ton véhicule et pas entendre. Mais après, tu le voyais quand même. Là, je sais pas, je le vois bien. Tu vois
And
que
his
les sirènes
attempt-
sont allumées quand même. Je sais pas, moi je vois ça, je me stoppe direct. Soit il est occupé de faire quelque chose d'autre. Je pense qu'il est en tort, le conducteur. C'est pas
to
possible.
brake wasn't enough to
Oh my
prevent a
God, the
collision.
conducteur est en tort.
Kyle filed an insurance claim, including his dashcam footage as evidence. When police arrived, they watched his video and chose not to give him a citation. The car was totaled and towed away. Kyle's still waiting to hear who was found to be at fault for the accident, but he wants to know what you think. Let him know in a comment below. Harry was driving in heavy rainfall when he went to overtake a semi. Unfortunately, tire spray from the truck was hiding an oncoming vehicle, and Harry had to slam on his brakes to avoid a head-on accident.
Oh. Ah, il a voulu doubler quoi.
As he passed the other car, Harry and his passenger both gestured at the driver to keep his headlights on. What a scary situation. Want to see what happens when you start drinking at 6 in the morning? Keep watching. Matt was towing a trailer full of wooden fence posts when a Ford Explorer hopped a curb in reverse before plowing into his 2017.
En plus, j'ai même pas regardé s'il y avait. On va voir. Je regardais juste un truc.
Harry was driving in heavy
C'est pas une ligne
rainfall
droite,
when he
déjà,
went to
il a le
overtake
droit
a
de doubler.
semi. Unfortunately,
Mais là, avec
tire
la
spray from the
visibilité
truck was
mauvaise.
hiding an oncoming vehicle,
Rien que la
and Harry had to
visibilité.
slam on his
On voit
brakes
rien.
to avoid a head-on accident.
C'est extrêmement dangereux. Il est en tort lui là. S'il se faisait un pet, il était. Si lui il faisait un pet là, le conducteur il était en tort.
As
Même
he
s'il a
passed
pas
the
les
other
phares.
car, Harry and his passenger both gestured at the driver.
On double que quand on a une bonne visibilité sur le pare-brise, pas quand t'as des flocons de neige qui sont sur le pare-brise en train de brouiller ta visibilité. Quand il pleut comme ça, tu doubles pas, tu restes derrière dans la file même si c'est long. Et s'il pleut plus, t'as une visibilité assez correcte, tu peux. Mais si tu fais ça, c'est très dangereux, très
To
dangereux.
keep his headlights on. What a
En plus,
scary situation.
Tu mets en danger les autres et tout ça, laisse tomber.
Want to see what happens when you start drinking at 6 in the morning? Keep watching. Matt was towing a trailer full of wooden fence posts when a Ford Explorer hopped a curb in reverse before plowing into his 2017 Jeep Wrangler.
Bon. Pourquoi?
The Explorer driver claims he got his foot stuck under the brake pedal, evidently with his other foot smashing the accelerator. While in reverse, the Explorer bounced off a Cadillac before jumping the curb, destroying a section of wooden fence, and finally slamming into Matt's Jeep. He continued flooring the gas for 30 seconds before finally turning off the car. For his part, Matt had seen the out-of-control SUV and had stopped, but he had no time to back up, especially considering that he was pulling a trailer at the time. Matt says the guy was very apologetic and couldn't figure out.
Peut-être sur la droite. Ah ouais, si, il aurait quand même pu. Hein.
Foot stuck under the brake pedal, evidently with his other foot smashing the accelerator. While in reverse, the Explorer bounced off a Cadillac before jumping the curb, destroying a section of wooden fence, and finally slamming into Matt's Jeep. He continued flooring the gas.
À cause de la remorque, il a pas pu. S'il aurait été sans remorque, c'était bon, il pouvait l'éviter. Mais vu qu'il y avait la remorque, il s'est dit je peux pas monter dans le. Ouais, c'est mort en vrai. Dommage. Bon. Bon, sur ce, c'était super sympa. J'ai bien aimé la petite heure de divertissement, mais j'ai des petits trucs à faire. Je vais essayer de voir si je peux. Ce soir, je vais essayer de jouer. J'ai un jeu pour ce soir là. Je vais jouer au jeu sûrement et je vais twitcher quoi, comme d'habitude. Venez nombreux, suivez-moi si vous appréciez le contenu. Et les dashcams, on en fera le matin, ça me plaît, j'aime bien analyser. Ça fait 20 ans que j'ai le permis, donc j'analyse un peu, j'ai un peu d'expérience dans ce domaine-là. Donc voilà, je mets un petit pouce bleu, on va s'abonner, parce que c'est assez pas mal, il fait des best-of de dashcam. Et voilà quoi, on va laisser ça là. Et on va off stream. Donc je vous dis au revoir et à ce soir.